We have got a lot of very nice guns to look at today, from the finest side-by-sides and over and unders ever made to this giant 4-bore. Welcome to Holts, guys. Let's go. This little 20-bore is actually one of my favourites of the sale for a number of reasons, really, but mainly it's just the quality of workmanship under a name that many people won't even know. It's lot 1515 and it is an Enrico Desenzani made 1973 in Brescia, Italy. The gun overall weighs £6 5 ounces. It's got 26 3/4 inch barrels, a proper European length, and a 14.5 inch stock. But we're going to focus on this engraving to start because this is what stands out among world-class engraving. Just to look at, you've got this beautiful ribbon work, and honestly, I'd be sold on this gun just off of this. It throws such movement, and just to be able to do that takes years and years of learning the craft and skill. We then look at the way that the light scroll fills in the background, and we've got this beautiful bouquet of flowers here that bursts out all around. Like, there's just the flow and the story here. This is as close to engraving art as you get. But then we look slightly beyond the engraving. If we pull out and look at the way that the action is carved, and we take our eye off the engraving and just look at the shapes of this metalwork, we've got this beautiful flow up to the lip here that then drops back in. I love how elegant that is, and then I love how this action then drops and sweeps away. It's elegant, it's subtle, but the lines of this gun just flow well. And again, things that take an incredible amount of work to do well are here in force. Touches like the top lever, the shape and the elegance here. This is best Italian gun making from a maker that most people would have never heard of. The stock features flat point checkering and an ever so slight diamond into the grip there. We've got a beautiful piece of woodwork. It's stocked in wood, so if you needed to extend it with a pad, you're not fighting a losing battle here. Not that 14.5 inches is short, but I always think in this way because I'm tall. We've got a single trigger system, really nicely done. And again, you've got the beautiful black trigger with a polished side. Touches you don't notice until you really start paying attention into this gun. Not the most popular of barrel specs in that length by any means, but it is a 20-bore. It's supposed to be light and pokey, and you've got a flat, filed, tapered rib on top. The sight picture down this gun is delightful. Pulling back onto the top lever there, and not to bang on about engraving, but I lap that up. The flowers, the scroll, the way that that works around, the retaining screw in the top there. Oosh. Just oosh. And that is Desenzani through and through. They're not a big maker, they're a boutique maker, which is indicative of the guild sort of structure of Brescia at the time. This wasn't made in one building, this is very likely made in multiple buildings by the best of the best. And what's interesting about people like Desenzani, and we've looked at a lot of these niche Italian makers over time, is it's no different to, let's say, the Birmingham trade back in its day. The name on the outside is one thing, and Desenzani is a great and respected name by those that know it, but is relatively unknown in the grand scheme of things. The reality, though, is the men who built this were chosen because they were the best of the best. And there are plenty of boutique makers who couldn't afford or didn't price their guns at that best of the best structure. Desenzani did. So I suppose the reality here isn't that we're looking at a huge value in the maker. You're not buying the name, although the name is respected. You're buying the hands that made and put this together, all of whom you can see did an exceptional job. I love the way this gun clips together. I love the way the barrels are made. That beautiful rib there with a loop on it is just top quality gun making. It's signed by an engraver, a named engraver, F. Aiora. I love that nouveau style of engraving that isn't just simple pictures, but engraving that has its own kind of language and flow. Like I said, it's art in itself because it's not just stuff stuck there. It's so much more than that. And there you go. This is a serious little game gun. It's not all sunshine and roses, I should point out. The trigger guard has had a welded repair onto the screw there. That's a little bit of a sadness, and some of the screws are slightly misaligned. This gun is gonna need a little service and a little love when you get it, and maybe a little polish up of that repair wouldn't go amiss. Well, as I said, the pure value in the quality of workmanship here, let alone the artistic quality, you're gonna go a long time, and I say this all the time, but you're gonna go a long time till you see another one of these like this, and this gun does weigh up and stand up to some of the best gun makers out there. In all, lovely condition for the fact it's from 1973. An era that we don't necessarily relate to best gun making generally, and I think if we spoke to Simon about the 70s, usually there's a nose turning up period there. But this is quite the exception to the rule. That in the 70s there were still incredible guns made, incredible craftsmanship, and an attention to detail and quality that you just, gets me going, that's for sure. Okay, I need to put this down, it's gonna get expensive. Simon, this one stood out for me when I was going through the catalogue, but I'm not entirely sure why.
It stood out for me as well. Normally, you know, I like my stuff sort of pre-First World War. This is anything but pre-First World War. This is 1993, Frederick Beesley, when they were at Amersham. It's the sheer quality of how this is made. Everything is done to the highest level.
Yeah, I think it's an important thing to remind yourself occasionally that not everything needs a deep and interesting history. There are certain guns that are just good, solid purchases that will make good, solid users for you for life.
The way this gun is put together, this will last you and the next generation, and probably the one after that. It'll give you a huge amount of service. It is such a well-made gun, and it goes together like very few other sidelocks that I've picked up, particularly modern sidelocks. Whoever built this, whoever jointed it, has done a superb job. And I have my suspicions that this was an outworker for a very, very high-end name. Moonlighting, perhaps, because it's that good.
This makes some sense, right? I think there are plenty of guns built in London factories, but there are also plenty that are built by outworkers because it's more efficient, right? It is just more efficient to do it. And that's not new.
No, it's not. It's been going on since gun making has been around. And in fact, in the 1860s, 70s and 80s, Boss & Co were getting their barrels made by a specific barrel maker out in the provinces, and he was bringing the barrels to London. Everybody was doing this. So they were looking for the best quality craftsmen they could find to produce the best quality guns overall at the end of the process. It is only when you get into the 1890s, 1900s, do they start to bring them under one roof and produce guns in-house and try and jealously guard these craftsmen as they were working for one particular house.
I guess that makes a lot of sense, right? As it became more brand specific, a lot more marketing in that era.
Yeah, marketing gets a little bit more like what we would recognise now as modern marketing. They're building up that brand name. I mean, this is skipping forward 90 years from where we normally look, and it's an outstanding sidelock.
I mean, we can start with the name, right? So Beesley was not a famous gun maker of complete guns, right? He's more of an inventor, patenter, engineer.
He is described as patentee to the trade. He comes up with Beesley's famous self-opening action, which he then sells to Purdy's.
1880?
Something like that, yes. And numerous other patents as well. He used to work for Purdy, then split off, and was allowed to use the Purdy name in brackets after his by agreement with the company. It was not him, treading on other people's or riding on other people's coattails. He was highly respected.
There was mutual pride there.
It was a mutually beneficial arrangement, and Beesley did extremely well out of it. So this is the later iteration. The name still exists, and they are building these guns, or they were building this gun particularly at the time, using the best possible outworkers around in the 90s.
But what drew me to it, other than just the overall quality, is it's a curious thing, right? It's like a bossy Holland.
It is. Exactly that. So it is an easy opening Boss patent action. It is a Holland hand detachable looking sidelock.
Mm-hmm. Profile at the back here is very Holland-esque.
It is very Holland-esque, yes. Nicely shaped stock all around, to be honest with you, of a good length, 15 1/8, which suits me perfectly.
Yeah, and relatively high in the stock as well. It's a very modern spec of gun.
It is, yeah, it is. So with a nice bump here and a nice flare out of the toe, which you don't often find these days. I think this one of the things that modern gun making gets wrong. I may have said this before. This shape here matters. It matters to how the gun fits in your shoulder and how you shoot a side by side. Gun fit on a side by side matters more than an over and under. Over and unders are more forgiving. You have to dance with it, and part of that is the shape of the stock is far less forgiving of mistakes if it doesn't suit you.
all of these things can be altered afterwards.
Of
right?
course,
That's
and we're
worth
going to come on
mentioning.
to talk about that in a bit.
It goes together beautifully. It's a really curious action design, but with best of both worlds and done to a standard that is not, let's just cobble these together. It's, we love these, let's make a thing.
Yeah.
The thing that I think lets it down, oh no, it doesn't let it down, sorry, I'm going to shut up about it. I don't think lets it down. That's completely the wrong attitude.
Yep.
The thing that will inhibit it going big on money,
Yep.
in the eyes of many, is this gigantoforend.
Yes, it's a 12-inch long forend with a hidden Anson pushrod and the hole cut out to be able to make it function.
Very Belgian Spanish, very pigeon shooting.
Very pigeon shootery. High level barrel protection when it gets hot. So if you're shooting high numbers of partridges in Spain, in hot weather, barrels heat up quicker in hot weather. We don't often have that issue in the UK because it's usually pretty cold when we're shooting the live quarry. But Spain is different. So yes, you're right. It is very continental in style at the front end, and it will probably put a few off. However, don't fixate on that. I think that's rectifiable. The money you're going to save buying this, if it stays within estimate, you can get any forend wood attached to that
and still be winning,
and
really.
still be winning.
That said, for all of when I looked at it first, I was like, oh, that's a shame. Because it's the immediate thing, right?
Yeah.
Is there's an expectation level, but as soon as you do this,
You see the reason why.
I am going to kill birds with this to a high standard.
Yes.
And beavertail forends on side by sides, and I don't know about your feelings of this. From my personal journey, I think at the beginning I thought they were ugly as sin. But the more I learn about shooting, the more I learn about guns, the more that actually, when done correctly, and this is not a bad looking thing, I've seen way uglier.
Oh God, yeah.
The result does beget the look. Lot 1662 is a curious one and one I was very excited to get my hands on. It's valued, I think, at about 12 grand. It is a 1998 built, sporting over and under, and real interesting period in British gun-making history for sure, or at least in the period of Holland and Holland's adventure into clay guns. To really understand this, I think we need to look at the world in 1988. Game shooting still existed, but the world of sporting clays across the world was growing. The idea that people would go out clay shooting and enjoy it and spend money on it was becoming a thing, and we were seeing it become a much more serious business than it was before. And if we look at where it's at today, certainly in America, it's an incredibly impressive journey that sporting clays has taken. Holland and Holland, makers of incredible fine game shooting over and unders in their own right and side by sides, saw that people were spending money on over and unders, not for game shooting, but for clay shooting. And their clientele was enjoying that. And so in order to join the party, a party that was realistically not buying British guns, they weren't, right? They were buying Italian guns, German guns, Japanese guns. Thought, you know what? Let's make a sporting gun. And this is what they came out with. We see a variant of this from them today even. They looked at what the world wanted, or what that market wanted, and it does sit, certainly, something like this. A 28-inch barrel, near 8 pounds over and under, with that bigger grip, wider cheek, heavier stock, single detachable trigger, with a manual safety. Something that they hadn't really ventured into before. So let's have a little look at what they came up with, because I think all in all it's actually an incredibly nice gun, and for somebody who wanted to shoot clays to a decent standard but wanted something a little bit different, I still think that this gun remains relevant today. Holland and Holland, when you think about it, is more related with royalty and empire and all kinds of old money. But they noticed, as we said, that the world was changing and that they needed to produce something different. They noticed that the sidelock, as great as it was dying a death in terms of popularity, and that the trigger plate was becoming the new thing. And so this gun, they said, let's make a trigger plate, a very fine trigger plate to our standards. Let's make it detachable. And so, if we pull this lever back here, which is a really nice touch, we pull this out, we see the detachable trigger unit. And this is what happens when a best gun maker gets their hands on the concept of a detachable trigger. We see something just a little bit different to everybody else. Still with a lot of the same concepts, but with beautiful hand-finished parts, beefier parts, hand-cut, not stamped, not forged, not CNC'd from other pieces of metal. What's interesting to me is that we see this tiny little wire spring in here, something that I bet they'd never even used before, but something that is incredibly effective. One thing I noticed about this when I was just having a cursory look over it with some snap caps is that the trigger pulls were some of the best in the world, as you'd expect. The concept of a detachable trigger was popular in continental guns. In fact, it became the norm through the ASCs and the Barazzis of its day, and so it's real interesting to see that they came up with their own version and to the standard which they did it. The way this comes in and out is actually easier and sweeter than everyone else's, but that's why, well, that's what you get with a Holland and Holland. Oh, look at that. Isn't that nice? Have a little look at this system here. This is the locking piece, and it's just done on pulling that lever back that disengages the safety catch. This detank comes back, and so when you push it in, that detank goes down and that bar comes out. It's simple, it's familiar with some, but it's done in a much more British gun-making way, which obviously as a Brit I find exciting. Obviously as a best gun lover I find exciting. Obviously as a detachable trigger loser I find really exciting. To repeat the point I made earlier, the real exciting thing here is seeing this gun as really a response to a changing world. And I say that the sporting clays market had a lot to do with it. I think that the reality, oh that's nice, the reality is that it isn't so much the sporting clays world as a market shift. Over and unders were very much a British thing, from the Boss 1909 gun through to the Holland over and unders, to the Purdy over and unders, to a whole host of incredible over and unders that were the thing to go to. But as the market really did move in the direction of over and under through the 80s and 90s, in reality, a lot due to the sporting clays phenomenon, is that these guys had to respond, and this is their response. Gone, not gone, but a step away from that traditional London sidelock and into something else that still stands up today. We still see the diamond grip running through the grip, and the grip geometry is actually really pleasant. The way that your hand falls on that forward is still really pleasant. This is a gun made by best gun makers. They knew what they were doing. They knew how a gun should feel. And they probably didn't do this alone. They probably, as with all great gun makers, brought in some great shots of the day to consult, to help, to offer advice on what a gun should feel like. And so it does feel very 1990s. The 28-inch barrels, very 1990s. Today everyone goes, you need 32s, but the reality is a lot of people would probably do better with a 30. And in fact, there's a whole host of people that would probably do just as well with a 28-inch gun. If we look at some of the scores from back in the day with 28-inch guns, yes, the world of sporting clays and shooting was slightly different, but they're still extremely capable. The balance point on this gun? What did you expect? Straight over the hinge, although the hinge is slightly further forward than one would traditionally have versus the trigger, if we actually think about technical balance here. But the way that it picks up and swings, you know that this would be a great gun to shoot. You could go and shoot good scores with it. You could go and shoot real nice birds with it and enjoy the process of owning a Holland and Holland over and under with a slightly more robust action than a sidelock for, we call 12 grand reasonable money? I think 12 grand is reasonable money. It's kind of crazy to say that, right? Like I've got 12 grand in cash in my pocket, but in the world of Holland and Holland, in the world of Holland and Holland over and unders, in the world of best quality British over and unders, which I don't think this technically falls into, right, as a trigger plate. Maybe it does. We can discuss that at a later date. What a thing. For 12,000, I just think you'd have so much fun going and shooting clays with this, and you could spend 12,000 on so much worse. All round a bit of me. I think if that had a longer barrel set, it would be priced a little higher and would probably have a lot of people drooling after it. But that's a gun to bring you a lot of joy. Not a gun to win a world championship, but let's be frank, most of us aren't capable. What a nice thing. There you go. You can go and see them. There are plenty of these around. This is not exceptionally rare. This is just an early example of what it is and an affordable example of what it is. Right, I'm going to play with this trigger unit for a bit more, and I'll see you in a sec for something else.
Like the words you wish you'd always said, like a hummingbird hanging in the air, like a preacher in his parapet.
We've looked at some curious old stuff. Let's look at something more of a palate cleanser, a more intelligent purchase for the masses, and that is this lot 1656 at 3 to 5 grand is a Beretta AA Brown Special Edition. There are a number of things about this gun that I think make it worth looking at, and let's start with the front. We've got a set of 29.5-inch barrels on here in 20 gauge. It's a 20 gauge gun, but this gun comes with 2 more barrels, a 32-inch set of 20 gauge barrels and a set of 28 gauge barrels, meaning you've got almost 3 guns in one box, a fast 20 bore, a slow 20 bore, and a 28 gauge that actually weighs a little more because of all the extra metal you've got to have around the breech end here. I think at £6.12, £6.10 and £6.06 as it stands right now with this 29-inch set of barrels on. So you've got 3 guns in one, which is always interesting. There are people who will appreciate that and there are people who won't. Having one gun that fits you nicely that you can make more versatile, be that through spare barrels or through spare chokes, is handy, right? And why not have spare barrels if they come with a gun, which they do. I think ordering that new with all those spare barrels would be quite the thing. Other than the brute force practicality of having multiple barrels, this is not a standard EELL, the old extra lovely. This is an AA Brown Special Edition, and Brown do some pretty cool things to a gun. They are minor, well, it's fair to say that they are minor, but minor changes maketh the gun. I mean, half of what we talk about in Holts is the little details that make a gun special. Brown take a Beretta, they slim the grip down, open it up, they put a extended trigger guard in it, they reprofile and refinish the stock, put a leather cover pad on it, and turn the forend into a rounded English style forend, recheckering it throughout and anglicizing it to a touch, or best gun makering it to a touch. What it allows you is the 680 action inside, which has been around for 40 years and is undisputedly one of the best actions in the world, and I'll hear nothing about it because, I mean, they're cheap to repair when they break, which they don't. They're cheap to retighten when they go loose, which will take you 12 to 15,000 rounds, which is a lot of rounds. And they've turned it into something more special and more unique. The wood on the back is a nice piece of walnut, and the grip, as we said, is being slimmed down. You can actually see the slimness through here. If you've ever seen a EELL, you'll know that this is a very different style of grip. You'll either like them or you won't, but for me, it just allows a more open, more classy, bigger hand feel, which is handy if you've got big hands and you like that. You've got a horn grip cap on there, buffalo horn grip cap, which is a nice touch with a screw in the bottom. You know, there's not so much to talk about here. They also drop in drop points, which is nice. But, you know, that's why it's a palate cleanser. It's not waffling, it's just, this is a great value thing and you won't see too many of them about. Simon, just now you gave me a very brief discussion on this gun and the guns in the case, and I stopped you and said we need to film this because it's actually fascinating.
It is.
So I'm going to let you recant why this 10 bore is interesting.
Okay. It's the condition of it. So when this came out of the slip, when the chap brought it in, I was like, that is in incredible condition. It is a 10 bore bar in wood, Hurdy style, 2 5/8" chamber, sidelock hammer gun by John Dixon and Son, with a lot of the colour finish still there on the hammers, on the action, a bit of the blacking, most of the blacking still on the trigger guard and the top lever as well. And because of the condition, it led us down the path of this is possibly formerly the property of one of the great gun collectors of all time. And it's actually mentioned in the Charles Gordon book. So Charles Gordon was an eccentric man. He put together a collection of over 300 guns of the highest quality.
That's good going.
Didn't just buy them from John Dixon, he bought over 200 from John Dixon and Son in Edinburgh because he was a Scottish landowner and a tragic figure at that. But he was also buying guns from Purdy, from Harkham and from others. Money,
Just spending.
Just spending money because he was a very strange individual. He had a tragic life in that his mother died very, very early on after he was born, and his father was a military man posted overseas, so was not around. So he was raised by his uncle and aunt, who, when he was 14, they both died within a short time of each other. So he was left on his own at 14 years old with a huge fortune, an estate in Peebles, and hundreds of acres in Edinburgh that were providing rent to him. So it was an enormous amount of income and money
For a 14-year-old.
for a 14-year-old boy.
We just cast your mind back many decades. And mine back 1 decade less.
Yeah. Thanks for that.
That's wild.
It is.
Like, can you imagine being 14 with limitless wealth?
It was not limitless. That was the problem, because he spent so much money on guns and wine and books and stuffed it all in his house. He never shot any of the guns. He never drank any of the wine. He probably never read any of the books. He just enjoyed the process of buying and collecting.
Wow.
And it's possible that he was on the spectrum a little bit, but he blew through his fortune over his lifetime and ended up insane and broke. He went bankrupt eventually. And
This
his
is the sort of story you tell your kids, isn't it?
I know,
About
it
money
is.
doesn't matter because it will drive you mad, insane and broke.
It's a massively cautionary tale. But his collection was sold off in 1908 in Edinburgh at auction, and the guns, the percussion guns, were fetching pennies, literally 75p.
Well, I think this is at a time when they weren't fascinating.
They weren't.
They were just old.
The interesting thing about Charles Gordon's collection is he was not always... His first two guns, when he ordered from Dixon's at the age of 14, were normal breech-loading 12-bores. But the third gun he ordered was a percussion gun, and it was...
When is this?
This is around about 1875, 1878, something like that. So percussion era has gone.
Completely.
And he's starting to order guns that are historical, but widely regarded as anachronistic. Old technology, and it's an indication of Charles Gordon's mania for collecting. He was a sporting young man. He had a big estate full of woodland, full of game, full of pigeons, and had a love of shooting. But his teenage years he becomes obsessed with ordering and collecting guns. This is largely down to his tragic life, effectively. I mean, you'd think anybody inheriting that amount of money very early on in their lives, because it was a huge fortune he inherited, couldn't be pitied at all. But his mother died when he was very young. His father was a military man posted overseas. He was raised by his uncle and aunt, and they both died within a short time of each other when he was 14 and he was left on his own.
Yeah, he hadn't sort of completed his manning.
No. He had
was
not
still
been
a
instructed
child.
in how to hold on to this estate, manage it correctly.
And he was sad,
Yeah.
in reality, at a time when men didn't get sad.
No, quite. I mean, he would have been, at 14 years old, the people that raise you and love you, and they're gone, and all of a sudden you're left on your own, you're going to go looking for something to fill that gap. And the gun collecting filled that gap, the wine collecting, the book collecting. It was all probably as a reaction to that grief. And eventually, Gordon goes on and starts buying in direct relation to his fortune. So at 18, he inherits his entire fortune.
Wow.
And he orders 18 guns from Dixon's that year.
I mean, I and you both enjoy the feeling of buying a gun. We
Yeah.
love guns.
Yeah.
Getting a new one is nice.
Yeah, it's a lovely feeling. New gun day.
But we're not buying bespoke new guns
No.
all the time. We're buying guns that we can afford
Exactly.
to a level that the enjoyment, you're not chasing the dragon continually, right? It's
No.
not like, well, 1 felt good, 2 felt better, 15 feels amazing.
Yeah. Charles
is
Gordon takes that
incredible.
concept of new gunitis and he turbocharges it. But he does it in a very interesting way. And in this box is an indication of the sort of things he was buying. So we hardly ever see Gordon guns from the collection come on the market. And we have not one, we've got 3. One is a pair and a single 10-bore, 2 5/8" chamber, which is beautiful and unusual in its own right, in that it's a Purdy pattern Dixon. But this pair, and it'll look like one gun, but we'll show you why you have to look deeper.
Wow.
Because It's more than one.
Let's just take a moment to appreciate that this is an incredibly good-looking case.
Yeah. This is John Dixon's way of casing guns. They use pigskin leather, they diamond checker the leather to look like the checkering on the guns. But the interesting thing for me here is when we look at refinished guns, we're often trying to establish whether it's original colour hardening or original blacking or whether it's been redone. This is never been touched because Gordon was sufficiently eccentric. Even though he shot guns himself, the stuff he bought for his collection, he never fired. These have never been fired.
I'm actually really fascinated to just take a step away from the story and go, that is what 1800s case colour hardening looks like, and that is what 1800s browning looks like.
Yes.
That's incredible in itself, right? Because we assume,
Yes.
because we don't have many references. I mean, and again, 1 isn't a great reference point, but it's better than 0. Mm-hmm. We assume that case colour hardening should have macho colours, and that browning should be brown. This is much blacker.
This is how I want Damascus to look. Again, Gordon spared no expense. He ordered, this is a pair of percussion 16-bore sporting guns ordered in the time of the breech-loading shotgun. So out of kilter with time, but he ordered them cased with all accessories.
If we give him the benefit of the doubt, it is pretty cool.
It is. I mean,
there's an element here of going, I want the last one you ever made. Make me one.
But this is the thing, and if you talk to Dixon's, and you can even see the colour hardening on the shot pouches, and it's astonishing that these things exist in this. We have to be really careful with these because you don't want to be the person to scratch something that has stayed in pristine condition since about 1880. Dixon's probably were selling Gordon guns that they had in the white built en masse, as we were discussing before. They were building production levels of being able to produce and satisfy orders quickly. But at this point in gun making, it's developing so fast, technology is becoming obsolete very, very quickly, and the percussion stuff's sitting on the shelf, sitting in the back room, not finished. And they're probably watching Charles Gordon come into the shop and saying, I think we've got a pair of 16-bore percussions. He likes them.
And we've both worked in retail.
Yeah.
And we've both had customers who were that customer. They enjoyed the buying experience.
Yeah.
They had a user, and they were just after curious things. So if you had something curious, it was for them.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about incredible investment at that level, right?
And he wanted this stuff. He wasn't being overly steered or ripped off by these people. He actually was interested enough to want to buy these guns, just to have them in his collection.
Sit down with that dude.
Be really interesting, wouldn't it? I mean, he was, as I say, he was not a recluse. He was a sporting man, but his mental health was not great. He's 1853 to 1918 are his dates. He survives the First World War.
Year of manufacture.
But by the time we get to just after the turn of the century, 1904, 1905, the cracks in the finances are beginning to show. The accountants are turning up and saying, look, you have gone way, way too far with this spending thing. The thousands of acres that you own, the acres in Edinburgh providing you rental income, and all of the other assets that you have, they're not covering your debts.
Because this is a time, interestingly, of credit to the rich.
Yes.
Like there was not cash on the barrel, per se. You'd go in, I'll have one of those, and then you'd pay it at some point. And we've discussed this in the past with other makers really struggling, right? Because, I'll make that for you, and people trading off their name, but never bringing forth the money. It's very
Manton was the same. Joseph Manton went bankrupt because the aristocracy wouldn't pay their bills. So he was giving them extended lines of credit and then couldn't satisfy his own bills. So it's nothing new. But this is an aristocrat going way, way too far with his collecting mania and ending up having to sell his entire collection for very little money in 1908. And his 3 sisters eventually step in, and what's left of the estate is a little cottage for him to quietly live out the rest of his days into 1918, and he is quietly insane living in that cottage. Yeah. So but it's astonishing to see guns of this quality and to actually appreciate the finish that we know is genuine, because all of these bits are untouched.
We rarely look in the antiques room, but I think that there is, interestingly, a lot that can be learnt in there that passes into, you call it modern.
Yeah.
Modern era.
Yes, but looking at the way these barrels are finished, if you want to refinish your Damascus barrels, there are certain people who can get close to this kind of finish. Don't go for the deep red brown. Please don't go for the deep red brown. It looks dreadful.
But I guess there's also, without more research and finding more original examples, if we look at blacking, and we can find more original examples of blacking because it's a more modern process, you do see variants even from original, right?
Yes.
There are bluer, blacker,
and
they
do vary.
Occasionally more purple, though it's more often than not accidental.
Yep.
example. So there may be a school of thought of the lighter brown.
Maybe. It's just not. I mean, everyone is different. It's not my taste.
Okay.
I'd rather see them like this.
And what is your taste is law. Totally reasonable. You are Simon Reinhold.
I am both prophet and law. The thing that's missing from these is the dog whistle in ivory that he normally would have, or bone, that he would have included in every case. He had a whistle in the shape of a dog's head in every gun case from the later period. And I think this was clearly, for some reason it's not included, but very often he did include that whistle. And if you find one with the whistle, I mean, Gordon stuff's so rare, but if the whistle is still there, because that's the sort of thing you could sell or give away, or somebody would come along, look at the gun and take the whistle away and use it and not put it back in the case.
Yeah, a bit like chokes.
Thank you,
label.
Simon.
What a
label
great bit of history.
Gilded leather. I've only ever seen one other label like this at auction from us, and it was last sale actually, and it was not a Dixon, it was McNaughton. And it was lovely. But the case itself was battered, but the label was an absolute stunner.
If you've watched a few Holts videos, you'll know that Blanch is a perennial favourite of mine. I've always thought they made some real nice and elegant guns, and this one, although slightly different, is no different in my eyes. This is lot 1408, a Blanch back-action sidelock ejector. Let's run through some of the basics before I get into a discussion on back actions and their position in the market. We've got 27 7/8 inch barrels. We've got 15-inch stock, stocked in a silver's pad. It's dated at 1896, so a nice early example of a gun that still stands up today as a great looker. It was reproofed in 1988 or 1986, and so we know that these Damascus barrels are good to go with modern loads. In fact, before we go into the back action, let's have a little look over this gun from back to front, because it's pretty. So at the back we've got an inch silver's pad fitted onto the stock. The stock is of that classic French walnut of the era, nothing too outrageous looking, nice bit of fiddleback, nice bit of contrast, but chosen for strength. Strength is good, right? This is why this gun still has a stock on it all these years later. I do believe it's refurbished original, although it's obviously been refurbished and recheckered. I believe this looks like the original stock work, and I could be wrong. This is why you need to contact these guys for a condition report on anything, but it feels and looks original. If we move up through, we've got this coarse checkering. Coarse checkering denotes a practical gun meaning one that was designed to go and shoot. And you see this on guns that were Scottish more often than not, but it's really nice to see it on a London-made gun. And Blanch is one of the London great gun makers. Founded in 1813, which is a long time ago, they were a respected London maker with long retail and manufacturing history, and you see all manner of iterations of them. But one thing you do see in Blanch is a continued elegance, and often they did things just a little bit different to other makers. I don't know why, but obviously just doing the same thing as everyone else only means you're fighting for the same market. Blanch have things like more elegant levers. They kept back actions alive longer than a lot of other people. They were known really for producing solid, well-finished guns with the absolute top-tier price of Bosses, Purdys and Hollands of their day. So for a name that screams a little less, maybe, or at least is less respected or less known, you are getting a gun that is of the same top quality. Their reputation and I guess the fact that we see a lot of them in this kind of coarse checkering, we see a more practical built gun, in my head meant that Blanch was for the person who's going to go and use it hard, although I have absolutely no actual data for that. That's just my current state of belief. On the engraving front, this is a little simpler, right? And that goes with that coarse checkering as maybe not one of their finest grade guns, which means we've got on the engraving front, we've got the J. Blanch & Sons in a giant banner, large font with best acanthus scroll and a beautiful border. And I do love this style of engraving. It's simple, it covers the space well, and complements the empty space. We've got a little bit of original colour hardening on there, which is nice. Nothing too crazy. But the real thing here is that you can see this lock shape and the way it's attached to the gun is slightly different. This is not one of their top tier guns, but it is still a top tier gun. I've said that twice, it must be doubly important. The back action, which is what we're going to discuss really, is this part here. What it means is the spring, the mainspring, sits here at the back of the action. This here, this AOA, is a bar action. This is the more common one that we see today. You see that pin there? That is the mainspring retaining pin, and that means the mainspring sits in here, inside the bar of the action, rather than at the back of the lock. This went out of fashion. This lives on. There are some benefits to both, of course. With this, the real benefit is that we have a much stronger but sleeker bar of the action. This bit, the actual piece of metal here, because you're not carving it out to take a mainspring, which is interesting, right? What it allows you to do is have that round body before round bodies became back in fashion later on. We have maybe, arguably, a longer, thinner sidelock, which gives you more meat in the stock heading up here, which could give you a touch more strength. Again, arguable either way. You also end up with a much more elegant and long lock, which doesn't look particularly standard nowadays, but I do think it's arguably pretty. There are some fringe benefits, of course. That slimmer bar and the way that this lock action is designed is lighter, so you end up with a lighter gun. The weight distribution is also slightly different, which can leave you with a slightly more lively gun in some cases. It was, at the time, cheaper or more reasonably priced to produce, given that 100-something years ago it was a slower process to machine metal than it was wood, and so making these parts simpler made these guns more affordable. All we have to do is look at this profile here to see that this is an interesting, very slim, very good looking and elegant gun. But interestingly, it's the lack of elegance and the lack of refinement that almost drove these out of existence. And you can see with the way it's machined together, it does take less work and it is less prestigious. For a best London gunmaker, by the early 20th century, we see very, very few examples of these. The back action had its heyday in the mid to late 19th century of sidelocks, but as fashions changed, this was viewed as old hat, old tech, too easy, too rustic. And there are some downsides. The trigger pull and trigger feels on a back action can often be less refined because of the way the mechanism works. Does this matter in any reality? No. They certainly have some practical benefits, but because the world of best London gunmaking, of which Blanch was a competitor, was competitive, why would you be making guns that were deemed old-fashioned or old hat? This is likely not one of their top grade guns, given when this was made. This is not one of the last, because we see later back actions from Blanch, but more often than not, we see a progression into bar action sidelocks from these guys, which I think is a shame. Where that leaves us today, these guns are rarer because bar actions were made for a much longer period of time. They are less valued because they don't look classic, right? This doesn't look like everybody else's sidelock, which I think is nice. If we actually look at the way it's done with these beautiful little bolsters curving here, the beautiful drop in the action, this is a great looking gun by modern standards, when practicality perhaps isn't all that, because we're in a position where you can buy one of these for not a lot of money and you buy a spare, so you can live with these things, and trigger pull is this and that, but the enjoyment of shooting this outweighs the fact that the trigger is slightly less refined than your friend's bar action. And that leaves us in a great position for those of us who love these kind of things to be able to afford them at a less serious price and a less competitive market than a bar action. One of the things about this Blanch that I love is this fore-end release lever here. How nice is that? You just pull that lever up and then the fore-end pulls off. Isn't that a treat? Again, just doing things slightly differently, very elegantly, and in true Blanch fashion. There you go. A back action Blanch with a short history of back actions and why they don't exist today. I think this is stunning. I love everything about it, from the checkering to the engraving to these little cocking indicators on the side, meaning when you pull the trigger, that gold line then clicks into the straight line there. All in all, what's not to love? Gotta love a Blanch. So this gun stood out to me when the listing called it Behemoth, and it is. It's got a 43.5-inch barrel. It stands at 5'8". That is a gigantic gun. The weight isn't listed, but I can tell you that it's quite heavy. And what makes it real interesting is it's a 4-bore Snider. A Snider, if you don't know, is one of these actions. You clip the hammer back, you press the button on the side, the breech rolls over, you put your cartridge in, you close it, cock it all the way, and you're away, ready to go. It's a very strong action, and one that was, I guess, short-lived in the history of gun making. We soon realized it's a lot easier to load a gun if it folds open in the middle. There are better ways. But this was, of its era, the go-to. I've never seen a 4-bore Snider before, but every time I see a big 4-bore, especially a nicely built one, this one's done by Cartwright of Norwich, so likely used for shooting ducks and geese. It's really nicely done. Big Damascus barrel, beautiful beveled edges around this part of the action here. Giant ramrod. In fact, I'm going to put it down because my arms are so tired. Big guns are cool. Big guns are so cool. 2 to 3 grand. Not bad for a giant gun. Simon, I feel like loving guns is a journey, isn't it? Like year by year, season by season, the things that interest you or you want to spend time researching and understanding changes.
Yes, you don't have to love it to be interested. Let's put it that way, because this is unusual. I like the shape of the hammers, the shape of the top lever, the shape of the action. It's a cape rifle that, quite frankly, I would have no use for, and I like my guns to be useful and used. But having said that, this is an interesting example of Victorian gun making.
So it's a George Armstrong cape rifle, 16 bore in one barrel and 500-450 in the other, which is a particularly useless cartridge nowadays, given that that is a black powder musket number 2.
Yeah.
Spec cartridge, which, if we think about it from a practical terms and what a cape rifle is for, to sort of jump ahead, a cape rifle is I'm traveling the world and I might need to shoot a bird or a tiger or a boar or a lion or a human.
Yep.
And I need it to do everything in one great package.
A tool for all jobs.
And so having the cartridge the same as your military spec cartridge, why not?
Yeah, it suits posting to the southern parts of the world, southern Africa, so, or any of the dustier parts of the world in the British Empire, because the officers were not only were they hunting for sport, but they were actually putting meat on the mess table as well.
Yeah. So 1870.
Yep.
Period when the British Empire, like we have anything to do with it. Our great-grandfathers and my great-grandfathers, maybe not yours, were indeed a part of that, right? And so you could be posted anywhere, and you needed a gun to do it.
Yes.
And so the world of guns looked very different to how it does today. Not one gun for one thing, but one gun for everything.
Exactly.
There's a lot of curious stuff going on here. Price-wise, it's not a lot of money, and there's a lot of romance going on.
Yep.
I don't understand a lot of what's going on here. I've seen a lot of cape rifles. This one, I immediately thought this is a converted percussion gun, but it isn't.
Yeah, but it isn't. No, because the action is clearly built as a hammer gun, not as a centerfire hammer gun, not as a percussion gun. So it is a centerfire cartridge gun all the way through, and yet it still has the ramrod housing. It still has, for some inexplicable reason, a patch box on the stock, which you would never need in a breech-loading cape rifle. So it appears, and it's had us scratching our heads a little bit, but it appears that this was possibly a gun ordered for delivery in a hurry out of barrels that already existed, action that already existed. I still can't explain the patch box, but maybe it was somebody's eccentric order.
Oh, I don't know. Like if you
maybe it's a cleaning kit. Who knows? Because that's probably a cleaning rod obviously not a muzzle loading rod.
I
because
feel
it doesn't need
like
one.
that makes a lot of sense, right? Because you have had times when you've needed a cleaning rod to knock a stuck shell
Yep.
out of a rifle or shotkam,
Yep.
mud out of your tubes.
Absolutely.
And it's not like you can go back to the pickup and get
No.
it if you're 10 miles out.
Exactly.
Right?
Trying to find a straight enough stick in the bush is not easy. So they're useful things to have. And those of us who've shot enough old vintage guns know that the extractor rims sometimes wear and cartridges slip under it. And the only way to get that out is either if you take it apart, if you can get it closed to get the screw out, to take the extractor out, to get the cartridge out, or just tap it out with a rod.
Yeah, I feel like you're there using probably not great quality ammunition 150 years ago.
Yeah, it varies.
And dirty old ammunition, right? So there's a lot of things that maybe that's actually a practical benefit.
Possibly.
But you'd have to be a curious or a very practical soul to think all of that through.
Yeah. Or it could be the gunmaker going, we're going to use these barrels.
That'll do, pig.
The ramrod tubes are already applied to the bottom rib. We're going to call it a cleaning rod. We're just going to use the barrels.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, there is even a ramrod stop up there as well. So it looks like it was barrels built for a particular, not en masse, but in advance of guns being delivered. So they'd build barrels, and then fit into action to deliver to client. And lots of gun makers were doing that.
Well, you're buying them in anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're buying them in, and I can't imagine the concept of bulk buying is new.
No.
10 is probably cheaper than 1.
Exactly.
50 is cheaper than 10. Right?
Exactly.
So it does make some sense there. But what a curious thing from a great time, right? I always find it funny, though. And I'd love if you have any genuine explanation. We've got 6 folding leaf sights here, all with platinum lines, not notches, which does make a lot of sense from a damage perspective.
Yep.
Out to 600 yards.
600 yards with a black powder Cape rifle is, shall we say, optimistic.
Browning the pack, maybe. Just shooting into a group and hoping something falls over. I genuinely don't understand.
And that's the leaf sight. And then you get to the flip-up sight, which goes even further. It doesn't hold, but it used to.
Is this boastful gun making? Is that ever a thing? Because you see this throughout things. Is it a case of like your speedometer going up to 150 in Ford Fiesta?
Yeah. Yes. Again, it's just using up what was in the rack, to be honest with you. So it's probably got very little relevance to the order. It seems to be we need this gun out in Craddock, which is what it was called at the time. It's now known as something else. It's Nahuba.
Okay, and that's
in the Southern Cape.
But Armstrong's a British company with a retail store / outpost
probably,
there.
An outfitters or an outlet, retail outlet in the Cape.
I am getting more and more fascinated with them, to the point I'll buy one day just to go out and
have a go.
I mean, but for what? Who knows?
Yeah.
Because there's better modern equivalents with drillings.
Yes.
Where you can actually shoot deer legally with it and you can take birds with it on a more practical basis.
Yeah. They fascinate because of the untold story. We don't know much about the maker. We're piecing together guesswork with the history, but it's reasonable guesswork for what we've got in front of us. But that's part of the fun. It's part of the romance of looking and buying and owning, is getting enthused about the backstory that you might imagine it's had.
To me, there's such a fascinating part of this era of world history that I find obviously romantic. We look at the realities of being in the middle of nowhere with one gun to save your life. Probably no access to particularly clean drinking water, with the chance of death being significantly higher than the chance of life. It's less romantic, but the idea of a true adventure, I think, sits within a lot of us. And this is a genuinely, truly adventurous.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
That we look for a tiny sliver of when we go on little shooting adventures.
Yes, we're trying to recapture those little elements today, but the Victorians were charging all over the world, finding adventure in all parts and all corners of the empire. So it's a fascinating gun for many reasons. I wouldn't say it's my favourite gun in the room, but there are elements of it that are sculptural and beautifully done. It's a nicely put together gun.
I think if we look at guns that are some of their parts of gun making, this is some of the romance and story that comes with it.
Yeah.
The gun making is basic utility gun making. And it's better than utility gun making, sorry. But and that's kind of where it sits.
It's before Colonel Fosbury comes up with his paradox for Holland Holland, and they start rifling the last couple of inches of a shotgun, 12-bore shotgun barrel, to be able to shoot solid slug and birdshot out of the same gun. So this is pre that. The Cape rifle was a solution to the same problem. Fosbury came up with something different.
Yeah. And then before long, we see Nitro Express rifles and a guy to carry a shotgun.
Yeah.
Which seems a lot better.
Someone yomping it for you. Well, how you live, Johnny.
How I dream, Simon. Like, just look at the blunt reality of my life. If I need a loader, I need to call up my Welsh mate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. I just think it's cool. Like I said, I'm
That's an interesting thing.
increasingly fascinated with this era of gun making.
Yeah.
Should we buy one and go shoot it one day?
That would be
Not
fun.
this one.
No.
A steel bid one.
Yeah, we'll see what we can find.
I tell you what, conventional guns often look really boring next to unconventional guns.
Yes, and this is highly unconventional. It really is. It's beautifully engraved, which is what attracted me to it, because it's not my normal stamp. But it's very, very well made. It is a grip cocking, also grip safety, 20-bore sidelock non-ejector by a Scandinavian gunmaker called CH Olgrren. Made in 1895 with 30-inch Damascus barrels, which are now 70mm chambers. So it's
Usable-ish.
It's
almost.
usable-ish, but you have to get your head around the cocking mechanism to fall in love with it. So that actually cocks the gun. You then, I haven't got any snap. I'll try and find some 20-bore snap.
Thumb on the safety catch and go for it.
And then go for it. Yeah, it's a very, very unusual gun, but the engraving is first class.
Yeah, and the shapes are intriguing.
Yeah. The lines are different. It's got this sort of back action lock plate, if we can put it that way.
Yeah.
With a sharp dip to the bottom, and then it flows up into a skinnier tail.
It's interesting looking for
It
sure.
is.
And the engraving is actually really nice.
It's beautifully engraved.
From the herons to the dogs. I mean, you're not going to find much of a finer dog than that.
No.
It's incredibly good looking.
It's a fascinating gun for £700 to £900. That's the estimate. There is 5% added to the buyer's commission because it comes from overseas, so be aware of that.
And yet,
always look at that in the catalogue, please.
It's not crazy money. For
It's not crazy money.
Interesting gun that you can use. And
Yeah,
a lot of the really interesting ones are just a bit done.
They're past their best and probably not recommended to be used, but this is...
There's fun.
Take model loads.
There's fun to be had.
Lots
here.
of fun. Guaranteed no one else will have one in the line.
And that's often what it's all about. Again, not a lot to say other than just what an interesting
What an amazing thing.
looking
With these
beast.
horn slivers, almost like pistol grip. Like the grips you get on a pistol.
And once it's cocked, that acts not in a super comfortable way, but
as a
it
pistol
does
grip.
act like a
Yeah,
pistol
yeah,
grip.
yeah.
I could get behind it.
It's over-engineered, overly over-designed, and you can see why it didn't catch on. But it's still a cool thing.
Oh, yeah. But sometimes being individual for the sake of being individual is interesting.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, right. Get a face
something
tattoo.
different.
Or
Yeah.
buy one of these.
Get a
I know which
face
one I'd do. Yeah.
Would you have that engraving as a face tattoo?
I mean,
I look
feel
forward
like
to seeing that next
if
time.
I had a face tattoo, it would be Rose and Scroll.
Would it?
I'd have a bouquet on my nose. All right, enough. Here is my proper palette cleanser for the video. The most fun, simple and reasonably priced gun probably we're going to look at today. The main sale at Holts is often filled with great old guns, some of which we've already looked at, some of which are dream-worthy. This is a little bit different. This is a Remington 870, one of the most basic, commonly produced pumps in the world. It is a common working man's gun, but it is dressed up like it's going to a black tie dinner because it is the Remington 870 Magnum The River Mississippi Ducks Unlimited Edition. All in all, just a little bit spicy than your standard 870. We've got an upgraded piece of wood on here. We've got gold washed engraving with a big duck plaque on the side, and it tells you exactly what it is. It's a 1982 Ducks Unlimited Mississippi edition, The River. Is this wildly interesting? No, but it is rare, curious and unique in the UK market, and for £300 to £500 if you wanted to add a pump to your life, which I think everybody should have one at some point, this is such a great option. The 870 still has available parts, it's been made the same pretty much since day one. Take that with a pinch of salt. Mechanically, it's very similar to day one, which allows you to find spares, allows you to just enjoy this and use it hard-ish. I say hardish, I'm now thinking that I regret saying that because this is in absolutely mintaculous condition. So Docks Unlimited has been around since 1937 for those who don't know, and it is a wetland conservation body, and they do a lot of charity work and limited edition guns and fundraisery things to raise money for wetland conservation, as well as doing, I think, good work from what I see. I'm sure that someone can enlighten me as to whether that is still the case or whether this is going to get overly political in the comments, I don't know. But they'll take something like this for a occasion or a charity auction or something like that, a gun that has been made in the millions, I think 11 million Remington 870s since 1950, which is a mind-boggling number of guns like this, and they spec it up and tart it up to make it something more collectible. This isn't in reality the sort of gun that somebody buys for use, but for occasional use, why not? If you want to go and just shoot a few clays and have a bit of fun with something a little bit less elegant and refined than your over and under or your side by side, this is an absolute peach to do it with. If you're looking in that kind of realm of wanting to do it but not do it with something modern, you've got some, well, to be fair, there's a Model 42 Winchester 410 behind me that's lovely, there's an Ithaca, there's some great options, but those guns are old. This one is, as in reality, still current, even though the design is old. I like it. I just thought it was worth sharing something a little bit less luxurious, but still curious and interesting, and a real insight to the sort of thing that if you dig through this sale catalogue, you'll always find something like this. And if we're sharing some things that we've never seen, which is always the game I play when I come here, I've never seen one of these and I'm unlikely to again. There you go, 300 to 500 quid. I always feel guilty for not showing more and deep diving on fewer, because there is so much good stuff in here. There's always so much good stuff in here. You've got a K80 and a DT for those looking for sensible stuff, a couple of Parazzis, a Churchill Parazzi, really nice sets of Brownings. In fact, there's one that I particularly like, 1610, a special Browning, which I think is kind of on the custom line of things. I just think that's a beautiful looking gun. It's big, it's loud, it's proud. Not the most subtle, but if you're going to go for a custom Browning, this has got all of the hallmarks of a classic Browning, and I think it's a 20 gauge as well. Solid mid and tops, all the things you could want. As well as over and unders, we miss out a bunch of box locks, a couple of really nice single barrels. But I just want to dwell for a second on this, which could be one of my favourite guns in the sale. This gun was built in 1926 and the name on it is Józef Spliko. It's a Polish retailed gun, but from all of my research there was not actually ever a great civilian arms trade in Poland, or at least from the research I did, that's what I found. Great military arms, some of the greatest pistols ever invented or patented came from Poland, but not sporting arms. This gun was born in Belgium instead. And what's real interesting about it is that at this time, Poland wasn't in the best of ways financially, and subsequently they had another pretty horrendous few years. But somebody there could afford to buy this or spec this or have this gun built to an incredible, incredible standard. This really does represent some of the best of Belgian gun making. The engraving here for me is really the star of the show. The way it clips together, the way it's built is obviously a star, but this gun is actually signed by a very famous engraver. In fact, the engraver that really designed and really started on this style of engraving. That engraver is Corbellin. Corbellin, if we look at this 1926 gun, was really testing new things, trying new things, or at least developing old styles with new patterns, which are extremely 20s. At a time that we consider British guns to be made at their best to a certain extent, a lot of the engraving on them is not that exciting. We have to work a bit harder to find it. And then we have this, a gun made in Belgium, engraved by Corbellin, sent to Krakow to be retailed in Poland, is engraved to an incredible standard. Just a beautiful piece of artwork in the engraving, every surface being covered. It just keeps giving more and more the more you look, and that's something we say here at Holts a lot, but there are guns that are like that, and there are guns that are not. It is a 16 bore, take that as you will, that might be a positive to some people. We have a raised machined rib, tapered. We have some of the most beautiful carved fences out there, and the scaling of the action is just exceptional. There is a big downside to this gun. I mean, the tubes I think are measured at 22, 23 thou thickness, which is perfect in the walls. But somewhere along the line, somebody has done a really bad job of changing this checkering and grip geometry. Presumably somewhere along the line, someone had a small hand or someone had some damage. We won't ever really know. But it means the grip is incredibly, incredibly thin. It means that this checkering will never be able to be saved because it's carved out in places and then checkered with a rusty nail or an axe or maybe some beaver's teeth. We'll never know, right? But it's not done to a great quality, and that's the thing that lets this gun down. Price-wise, it's not an expensive thing. I think it's up at about $1,500 estimate, which for this part of the gun right here, and well, all of it except this part here, is exceptional. Yeah, you're not going to get a big name, but Corbellin himself is a big name. We see guns forevermore copying this style. Now, Art Nouveau style of engraving became very popular and copied by plenty of makers. It inspired plenty of makers, what I mean to say there. But the standard and level of work here is just juicy. I guess like in a lot of parts of the world, as much as Poland wasn't a superpower in that period of time, neither did it have wealth throughout. There was always a strong, wealthy class who could afford the best of the best, and this is it. There is no Polish equivalent of London or Brescia or, in fact, Liège. But like with all great things, importing the best, it's still the best, right? I love classic hunting rifles. A little bit like the old shotguns, they come with a lot of stories, except when it comes to classic hunting rifles and hunting rifles for myself, I do like efficiency and accuracy, which we have got really good at over time. But the journey to get there was not immediate, right? And actually looking back through the history of sporting rifles, we get to see little things that are, evidence of progression. And this here is one of them. It's a pretty simple little Holland Holland bolt action rifle. It's lot 1110. It's, I think, 1,000 to 1,500, and it is in 240 Apex, one of the lesser known proprietary calibers from H&H. Let's run through some of the basic stats on this gun. It was built in 1924. It's got a just shy of 24-inch barrel that was a replacement post 1963. It weighs in unscoped at 7 pounds 3 ounces, and it's got a 14 3/4 inch stock. It's got some Weaver bases added to it with some relatively unexcited mounts and a 6x42 Swaro scope on top, which does bring it into a more practical realms of use than it would have been originally with the open sights for the modern world, right? And again, just tells a little of the story of this gun, is that it has lived a life of use, which is really nice. You'll know Holland Holland, it's one of the greatest British gun makers of all time. They're known for making great shotguns, but also rifles, and especially their own proprietary calibers, of which 240 Apex is one. A lot of rifles back in this era were not made from scratch in the factory. Rifles were meant to be solid and reliable and more affordable than shotguns in many terms. This rifle was probably built for deer stalking, safari, just use. And so many of them used an action like this. This is just a Mauser action gun. And we say just a Mauser action gun. A Mauser action gun is the basis for most great guns even made today. We've got the cutout on the bridge there, which is always a nice touch. So when you're loading it, you can do it blind. You just roll the cartridge into the groove. Your thumb falls through this hole and you click the cartridge in. I do love a cutaway. Just always makes me think of practicality and use. And I've shot a couple of rifles with that cutaway, and yeah, I've never used one in a situation where I couldn't just look at the cartridge going in, but the point is being able to look at what you're hunting or be aware of something else, roll your thumb in and just be able to load it quickly and efficiently. This gun is a takedown, again, just indicates that it was taken for travel somewhere. You undo this screw here and the thing comes apart. Almost as simple as that, to be put in a shorter travel case rather than traveling with a very long gun. It gives off that 1924 Empire officer energy. It was ordered by a major, and you can imagine I need a hunting rifle for wherever I'm going. It needs to be takedown because I'm traveling. Here we go. The real interesting thing here for me, other than the fact that it's a really cool old gun that's been kept alive with rebarreling, clearly being used and has some cool stories behind it, is the 240 Apex. The 240 Apex is one of those early fast cartridges, and we think of modern cartridges and there's new cartridges released almost every year and they're the new best thing, but forevermore we've been looking for flatter shooting, faster, better ammunition. It's got a 240 head, much like the 243. It's designed for flat shooting, light recoil, medium to small game, and it sits in that space, like we said, of early fast cartridges. I don't know about you, but when I think of early fast cartridges, my mind usually goes to the States. But actually the reality is the Brits were there beforehand. I think every hunter experiences it, right? I want something that doesn't kick, that doesn't drop. And we've got some incredible cartridges on the market now, but forevermore we've been searching for that perfect combination. And the reality is, ballistically, we hit it a long time ago, and now we are just refining it. This 240 Apex, pretty much a dead caliber, sits here as a reminder of that. Holland Holland have been around since 1835 and have been famous for a lot of different things, one of which is safari rifles for world traveling officers in the heyday of the Empire, and this gun here is no different. Today we think more of like the 375s and the big game rifles, but for every big game rifle there had to be a plains game or small game, medium game rifle, and right here is an example of that. It really sits as a reminder that not all classic calibers are about brute force. This one is about speed, efficiency and elegance, years before many of us think that that was even a priority. Lot 1102 is a good practical gun again. It's a Mauser M98 Magnum Action Rigby 416 big game. All in all, just a really good practical rifle for somebody looking for a tool that they can depend on to go to Africa or wherever you need your 416. In fact, there's a whole selection in this sale of really nice practical rifles, which there isn't always. For, what is this, 3 to 5, 4 to 6? It's a heck of a saving over a new one. And you can get lucky when you look at guns like this to find ones that people bought but never used, and I feel like this one never got used in anger. It's far too clean and nice, which is pretty rare for a Rigby like this. To buy one to just look at is not the point in a Rigby, right? Big fan of that. In this case is a pair of guns I'm very excited to look at, and I haven't actually had a look at them other than on the website. They're lot 1353, a pair of bosses with game scene engraving. Something you don't see all too often. And then we look at the date of 1919, which was not, I would have thought, a big year of manufacture. Just after the war, not many people were ordering guns generally, and so this is going to be a very exciting thing to look at. We've got gun number 1 here, which is what we'll start with. They've got 28-inch barrels, 14 3/4-inch stocks with a leather covered pad. Suboptimal to a certain sort of purist standard, but let's be honest, I'd rather a gun that was of sensible length rather than a 13 3/4-inch stock that this may have been from the factory, but I don't actually know. Boss, if you're unaware, which hopefully you are at this point, is one of the big 3 names, if not the name in London gun making. Makers of best guns only, makers of some of the finest things out there, pioneers of the over and under the 1909 patent. I mean, some of the designs from that we still see. In fact, a lot of the designs from that we still see in some of the best guns out there today, which is quite the testament. They're still making guns today to that same exceptional standard. The rounded bar and game scene are quite interesting as well. Game scene sort of comes in and out of fashion in London gun making, certainly from what I've seen and my experience in here. You don't see it all too often. More often than not, we're seeing scrolls, foliate engraving, but to get a quality game scene is rarer. Trying to think back through some of the guns we've seen. It's very common on guns that went abroad, but much less common on guns we see here, and I've seen a few, and every single time it does excite me. That hand-done game scene to a high standard like this is curious. The rounded bar is also curious. It's a design feature that we see come into popularity later on, but in 1919 that's still relatively early in that sort of era of rounded bar guns, which makes it curious once again. It's a true matched pair in a true matched case, ordered with intent, and a proper pair in 1919. I'd love to know more about the guy who ordered these back then. It's probably a fascinating story, right? This #1 gun has a pheasant on my side here, on the left-hand side, and a flying grouse, maybe? Let's say grouse on this right-hand side. On the bottom we see the bouquets as we do on the sides in that classic boss style, just again with a vignette on either side of game scene. We've got scalloped rib 28-inch barrels with that straight hand stock with lovely pieces of wood on both. I don't show guns like this when we come to Holts too often, because inherently once you've seen a great quality boss or a great quality Purdy, there needs to be something that stands out with them other than just showing the same thing time after time. And occasionally it's mentioned that we show the less high value guns, some of the more curious guns, and we could just do an hour of all the Hollands in here, and I'm sure someone will get interested by that. But there's 6 years of Holts content we've gone through. But something like this is totally worth sharing. They're quite good value for what they are, and you'll probably, I mean, you'll never see another pair like this. They're not all that, you know, they're 100 odd years old, over 100 years old, so there is some signs of life. We've got ever so slight cleaned rust on the barrels here, and that's just surface. A rebluing would have these back to absolute perfection. Whether that puts you off or not, well, that's your thing. For me, I think there's less of a stress with something aesthetic like that, and when you're looking over guns, certainly like this, you're going to have to take some concessions. Having to have it reblacked is a concession I'd be willing to make. If we pick up the #2 gun, we've got hares. We've got a hare on the left side there and a hare baby rabbit on the right hand side. An interesting animal to have put on these guns, but if we think back to the era of 1919, a lot of wild birds, a lot of wild game, and big hare drives were standard back then. Less common now, though they still exist. It was the sport of the rich, and now it's sort of more of a conservation-based job in many circles, which is interesting, right? How society changes. This is a great time to have a deeper look at that rounded bar. A rounded bar action is not a square bar action, and that sounds very simple, but a square bar action we'll all be aware of, and it doesn't take much looking, he says, to just go and find one, but we're going to look at one later. What that is perfectly square sides, much simpler machining, perfectly square side plates, everything is done in that Teutonic right angle perpendicular build. Much simpler. To have side locks that curve into the wood, to have a bar that flows round is significantly harder work. I believe it was introduced in like 1893, and by 1995 there was only 260 odd examples, meaning this is a pretty rare beast and does sort of come in very early on that journey. There was a big upcharge for that rounded bar, which probably put a lot of people off, and you had to really appreciate it. You got to think gun fashion changes slowly. Even now we look, I mean, we're here looking at a 100-year-old gun and talking about gun fashion. There's a lot of people who like the older stuff. When someone comes up with something new, something innovative, it takes a while for the market to respond. Certainly back then, when people were less liberal with their gun design and gun aesthetic enjoyment, the idea of having something that didn't look like Grandad's would have been pretty wild. This is inherently like getting a, I mean, there's not too many great modern equivalents, something like a 828 from Benelli, wildly different looking gun. This is the equivalent of that. It's not, this is way better, but you know what I mean. You had to be almost brave or different to have a rounded bar. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, these things are much more popular. We appreciate the work that goes in. We appreciate the elegant lines, the sweeping flow of how the engraving wraps it. And we appreciate this. Crazy, eh? To sum it up before we move on to something a little more attainable, maybe, let's break it down, the things that I really love about this. First, the 1919 build. It was a point where Britain was rebuilding. We weren't in the best of places, but it's nice to see that we were still capable of building absolute luxury right here. I love the specifications, you know, they're not crazy, they're not ostentatious. They're just different enough that make this gun special. Like all best guns, there's likely different people involved in this build process, and even in the engraving here, it's likely that someone like Sumner has done the scroll and potentially Kell did the game scenes. It's noted that the gun cost 235 guineas, which is the equivalent of tens of thousands of pounds in today's money, just months after World War I ended, and was ordered by a C.E. Hickman of Danes Court, a landed gentleman that I don't know a lot about, but it's the sort of thing that you could sit and dig into. And that's the beauty of these old guns, is finding out their journeys and finding out their stories and finding out the stuff about their previous owners, given that this is an elite top-level gun made by a gunmaker founded in 1812. You know, there's so much history in the maker, let alone the gun itself. All right, I'm gonna stop. Let's move on, because I could do an hour-long film on these, and that wouldn't be that interesting. Thank you for watching TGS Outdoors. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. The channel would not be possible without the support of our amazing sponsors who keep videos coming to you week after week. If you really enjoy the channel and want to support it yourself, please consider becoming a member. Channel members get a bit of extra content.
Today we're going to be talking about good shooting advice.
But mostly, you just keep us going, and we love the support. There's a great community goes on behind the scenes. Take care, guys. Goodbye, and we'll see you on the next one.
Is incredible strength through the hand of a single shot hammer rifle, which I think is to be honest with you. We all love a single shot rifle in 303. Flat powder 303.